everybody, it's me, Laura, and today we're going to be doing my drops, my dots, my curls, and my swirls. Yes, I know we're getting way too fun, but I have to do this. So this particular video is going to be emphasizing the new Sharpie Creative Markers that are out there, and I absolutely loved it using my polymer clay and those particular markers. But what I'm also going to be doing here is I'm really doing a freeform sculpt, but in a jewelry format. So instead of doing a creature or just doing that sort of like ambiguous freeform sculpting thing, I'm going to create jewelry using the freeform method, or I should say that freeform sculpting method, if you will. Anyway, right here I took a ball, and as you can tell I measured that out, and I created a teardrop which I flattened down with my hand, forming it and also using my tissue blade. I'm then coming in and I'm flattening a log here, and I'm just cutting it flush, and I'm going to just pull that, stretch it just slightly, and have it go at an angle over the top of this teardrop. Now, in the sculpt of creating these teardrop jewelry pieces, and even the circular, more swirly type piece, I'm really going to be using only my standard tools and my ball tools. I'm not going to go ahead and use some of the weird tools I don't usually use. I'm just going to stick strictly to my more standard tools, which is really my needle tool, my knitting needles, my burnisher, my X-Acto knife, my firm tissue blade, and then also using those standard ball tools I like to go to every once in a while. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys just watch my hands talk as I put together this first sculpt on my first teardrop. All right, so I need to mention right here that the form has been baked, okay? And I'm bringing in some fresh black clay. I'm going to use a little super glue and a little bit of that translucent liquid clay, and I'm going to adhere that black piece, which was rolled out actually on a number 6 setting, I believe, not very thick at all, right? And I'm going to place that over the back, and then I'm going to trim it to the back side. Now you're probably wondering, why would she put black clay over the backside of this mud form? Well, here's the thing. I probably should have had the whole thing be black, or at least took my mud clay and maybe made it black using Kato's blackout, but I decided to go ahead and use the mud clay as it is. Now that mud clay, when I created the form originally, this teardrop form, I baked it as soon as I got done creating the form itself at 275 degrees for about 10 to 15 minutes. But once I had that black clay on the back side of this, I'm taking my needle, I'm trimming it up, and then I'm also going to be reforming the holes that I had put into this pendant originally. Once that is done though, I'll go ahead and bake this piece for about 7 minutes at 275 degrees. All right, so now I'm going to start doing my swirl form, and this one really starts out with a long snake, and it's going to be tapered at both ends, and really it's just a matter of curling it up. And the whole pendant is really pretty much based on that whole concept. You're just going to be creating almost like, oh, I don't want to say snail-like forms, but kind of similar to. And you're going to be creating all of these little swirls kind of off of the main swirl and then adding in dots as well. Once again, once you get this main pendant all finished up, you'll then bake this at 275 degrees for about 10 to 15 minutes. And then I come back in again with the liquid Sculpey and with my super glue, attach in a very thin piece of black that was again created on my number 6 setting on my Atlas pasta machine, attach that in, and then I'll go ahead and reform the holes if there are any holes in this piece, and I know there are. Reform the holes with my knitting needle or with my regular needle tool. Again, bake that at 275 degrees at 7 minutes on the second time. But once again, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys watch my hands talk as I create my swirl formed pendant. Okay, so now we're going to start creating our second teardrop. And as you can tell here, I start with that ball again, and then I'm going to press down, creating that form. But before I do that, we've got a 1-inch diameter ball here of clay. Here's the thing, I didn't tell you guys before, these pendants are kind of large. If you like large jewelry, this is a nice way to do it. I want to say the overall pendants turned out to be about 3 inches long by about 1.5 inches wide on the teardrops. And then the circular swirl type, it was more like a 2.5 inch, in length, and probably about 1 3/4 in width. So these can get kind of large. That being said, you don't have to make this stuff huge like I'm doing here. Part of the reason why I do it as big as I do is mainly for the camera itself, because I figure, you guys got to see what I'm doing. How else are you going to be able to make it, right? You got to be able to see the thing, And so that's kind of what I'm doing here. However, that said, and mind you, I'm making jewelry out of this. It doesn't necessarily have to be a jewelry piece. Sometimes I like to use these things as ornaments as well. So with Christmas and that sort of thing, you can make these more festive. You could do a pure green and red thing, celebrating the holidays. So if you wanted to do something like that, or maybe some other thing to celebrate somebody's, special occasion, I don't know, attach it to a gift box or something, or just, that sort of thing. I always look at this where there are multiple options to whatever I do, and especially in freeform. It doesn't have to be a picture piece. It doesn't have to be a specific thing that it's supposed to apply for or apply to. But it's really just to be something that you can enjoy and create. Remember, the whole idea with doing freeform, at least in my mind, is to enjoy the process. Enjoy creating in general. This is supposed to be relaxing and enjoyable. And I know many of you are like going, okay, how is this enjoyable? This looks really hard. It's not necessarily. Just sit down with a lump of clay, whatever that is, any of your mud clay, and just have fun. Enjoy it. Enjoy it. That's what the clay is supposed to be there for, is for you to enjoy and have fun. So with all of that said, once again, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys watch my hands talk as I really feature mainly the ball tools in this particular second teardrop form. Okay, so on to the painting, and this is a blast. Oh my gosh, I love this. Oh, I can't help it. I love these particular markers. I think a lot of it is because, I have Poscas, and I think a lot of artisans do, which are those acrylic, of course, paint markers. And they are wonderful. Don't get me wrong, I love Posca. And part of that is because Posca does offer the metallics and stuff, but this was refreshing. And the reason why it was refreshing is the thing that Sharpie markers are great about here is that you don't have to do the shake and pump. That sounds weird, right? Or the pump and shake. That sounds better. I like that. And what I mean by that with Poscas, you have to shake the pen and then you have to pump down onto your piece of paper or whatever to get the paint to come out. And you have to do that ahead of time, because if you dry and do that on your final piece and you get a whole ton of paint coming out, then you got a big mess. Oh, I hate that about the Posca. That's the one thing I don't like. So you don't have to do that here. You don't. You could automatically take them right out of the container and just start using them right off, just like I'm doing right here with the bullet type marker. And speaking of those particular bullet type markers, there are two sets, okay? There's the bullet type markers, which are really fun to use. And then there's this type, the brush type, which I love because these are more for detail, and really, they're really set to polymer clay artists, I think, just because they are a detailed pen. And I like the brush tips. They're nice. You can get some really nice detail with them. However, you will see that I have to cheat a little bit. I do have to use a little bit of Posca when I'm using, or I should say painting, these particular pieces up, but that's okay. One of the things I do like about these pens also, either set, is that they feel good in the hands. So when you're putting it down, it just feels good. I'm like going, I love how these go down. There's not a bunch of buildup. Look at all and you do get like 12 colors. That's probably the one thing I would say I wish there were more of. I'd say, Sharpie, make more colors. These are great pens, but make more colors. I'd also love to say, make some metallics too. Metallics and maybe even some glitter pens. If you can do that in this type of pen. They were absolutely beautiful, right? Anyway, there's that. Plus, I also like the price and availability of these pens. Because it's Sharpie, you can find them practically anywhere. Well, at least here in the States. I can't speak for outside the States. But here, I mean, you could go to your Walmart or any of your local stores, and generally they'll have these around. And I love that part. So they have that. Plus, it's nice to be able to buy a set of these pens, even though it's only 12, and the price is decent. You're not paying crazy amounts of money for some of these, these art pens. Because really, when you think about it, the Poscas, they get expensive. You have to build up a little bit of funds to get some of those. But these you could get all in one set and just enjoy. So right here, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to let my hands talk once more. And in this particular pendant, I'm going to be featuring the cool side of the colors. My blue, my green, my dark turquoise in this set, the purple, gray, and white Posca for detail. Okay, so sue me here, but I forgot to mention, yeah, I used also the red metallic for a few little details on this particular pendant piece. I wanted to see what it would look like. In this case, I would say I probably should have done a little bit more with the white. And also, I would have to say, with these particular paints, maybe take out some black paper and put together like which colors you might want to use all together and see how they look together. You know, this worked out okay, but if you're trying to plan it out, get some black paper and then use them on black paper and see how a certain set of colors work either with each other or maybe they don't work so good. It'll give you a better idea of how it's going to look when you go to paint your pendant. Okay, so now we're going to start painting up this swirl pendant, and I want to mention right here, and I didn't on the teardrop, that I needed to use the combination of the bullet type and the brush type of paint markers, because the thing is with the bullet, it gets a nice overall coverage, but it can't get into really tight areas where that brush type can get into, and that's what I did on the teardrop one. Some of the areas were just too far, they were deep, and the little bullet would, you know, that nib would not go in to cover it entirely, and so that's why I like to use the brush type too. Anyway, I'm covering this up with the black, and then I'm going to come in with some really fun colors on this one. I will be featuring my purple, my blue, my red, my looks like the dark turquoise, and then my gray, and then of course using my white Posca for the highlights. Now in this particular piece, because there were so many big, I want to say there was a lot of ups and downs in betweens. It was hard to get the brush in even because there were just so many dips and stuff. You're going to have these little paint markers where they might touch on an area you might not like. And if that's the case, just go back over with your black. It's real fast. It dries really fast. And you really can see that even with me taking the red and going right over that purple. I didn't like the placement of it. So, you know, this is where you might want to go ahead and with each of these sections, see I got a little bit of red there. I'll put purple back over it. But the thing is, you might want to go ahead and just lightly tap on an area or just start to paint a little bit of the color you want to figure out where you might want to place that color. Because sometimes you're like, okay, I'll place that here, but then you're like, no, I don't like the placement of that because it's next to this particular color. And again, even though this is not colored clay, I like to play that little game of contrast where if I put a dark color down, like I've got with that purple, it'd really be nice to put a nice bright right next to it. Hence the idea of why I've got my red going on here. So once again, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys watch my hands talk as I finish up painting this swirl form. Okay, so I want to mention here, I start bringing in my little swirls. Now, this is kind of new for me, trying to bring in little swirls onto the clay, and especially in a three-dimensional form like this. Because it's 3 dimensions, it's a little bit harder to make sure you get the forms to turn out just right. And at first I thought, oh, it's not turning out. But I just thought, no, keep going. Keep going. Keep making these swirls onto the clay in this particular turquoise area, and it turned out just fine. So if you think, oh no, I'm going to mess it up, get over the fear. You got to put the fear aside and go with it, baby. Go with it and just keep going. You might be surprised. It'll probably turn out just fine in the end. I need to mention here that once I got all of these forms painted up, I went ahead with a water-based varnish and covered the entire thing. It really made the entire piece come alive. All right, so now painting our second teardrop, again, I'm going to bring in those black Sharpie markers, or I should say creative painter markers. And I'm using both types again. Here's the thing. In doing this, I will admit that there were a couple of pieces I've tried where I just used my regular black matte acrylic paint and I used a brush and just said to heck with it and just went wild and painted them. And that works too. You could do that also. If you don't want to have to go through using your nice black particular marker, these paint markers on your pieces, you can just go with your regular acrylic paint. That said though, I really did have fun with these markers. They were so much fun. I love the flow of them and I love the feel. It was nice. Anyway, from here I decided on this particular teardrop, I wanted to use my Poscas a little bit more. I wanted to have them work in concert with those creative Sharpie markers, and I think they worked great. And the reason for that is because the metallics in the Posca especially, and you can get very fine detailed, you get the 0.7 millimeter nibs on these. You could get into really tight little areas, but they have a nice shine, right? So you get the shine from those metallics, and then you combine that in with your regular Sharpie Creative Markers, it works great. Here's the other reason I like using the Posca with the Sharpie. Those Poscas, like I said before, they can get expensive. Those pens, they can get expensive per pen, all right? Unless you buy a group of them, and even then, they still can get expensive. That said, you bring in the Sharpie where it's a little less in, paying out on price. You mix in your regular kind of colors with the metallics and bam, baby. It just is a nice combination of pens to work with. So from here, I'm just going to go ahead and let you guys watch my hands talk once more as I paint up the second teardrop form. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish up these pendants. They've all been varnished over, and I'm bringing in some jump rings. These are fairly large. I want to say they were like a 12 millimeter. It was a larger jump type ring, and you really needed to because this, the hole that I had kind of planned out for it, it's kind of into the clay, but you don't want it to where you pull it and then it rips out of the clay. So I had to make sure there was enough there for me to do that, and hence the idea then I had to go ahead and have larger jump rings. That all said though, I love doing this end of the video where I'm going to be adding in the wire. The reason why I like to poke holes all the way through these free forms in this jewelry sculpt is because I could take that wire and then curl it to my desire of whatever it is, curls and swirls, and make it so that it comes off the piece, giving it more of a dimension. And as you see me do this in this section with these pendants, you'll be like, oh, wow. Because part of me is like, I put the wire in, and then I'm thinking, wait a minute, what if I had this dangle off of that wire? What if I did this off of that wire? Oh man, it reminds me of when I played with calligraphy as a kid. I would create the letter and then I do all the little serifs and stuff off of the letter. And I got so involved with that pretty soon you couldn't find the letter itself. You're like, what letter is that? Because you couldn't find it because there were so many things coming off of it. And yet that's kind of what I wanted to do here. Mind you, I only did the wire. It's almost like I was threading through the wire to have just some fun little thing to do with it. And I just loved it. So you'll notice here as I'm creating these loops off of this pendant, I'm using that pot holder there. I just use that pot holder. You could just use a piece of cloth or whatever you have available, even your shirt. That's what I do sometimes, just to straighten out that 22 gauge wire. And then just thread this wire through like I'm doing here, making all these different kinds of loops. I'm flattening it on the back and I lay it down even on my tile surface to kind of flatten out that wire to make sure it's flat on the back side. Another thing in finishing these up, I wanted to go ahead and place in some of my pointed back clear rhinestones, and I'm using E6000 this time. I didn't want to use the super glue. This thing's not going back into the oven, so I don't really have to worry about it. And I thought, let's just use the E6 because I know it'll be in there solid and it'll stay. I'm also using the SS16 as they put it on size here for rhinestones. You might want to go ahead and look for larger pointed back rhinestones. They might cost a little bit more, but they're well worth it when you're putting these particular pendants together. In threading the wire through on my swirl pendant, I want to give you guys an idea on this 22 gauge wire, how long it is. I left a tail here, and I like to go in through the back. That's how I like to start it, whether it's from the top or from the bottom. And I make sure it's flat then when it's coming out the back side, okay? But the idea here is that it's about a 4-inch, 4.5-inch, which is pretty, that's quite a bit of wire sticking out that first area there, right? And that's to help swirl up at the end, right? I want to say the overall piece of 22 gauge wire I was using here was close to 2 or 3 feet. So it's quite a bit of wire, but I want to be able to adjust those loops, whether I want them really, really big or really, really small. If you want them small, yeah, you could go with a shorter piece, but I can't always tell. I'm like going, I really like the flamboyant wire. I like to really go out there with my wire and make those curls. On the third pendant piece, I really decided to start my wire at the bottom. I thought, let's try something totally different. The other two I had kind of started towards the top, and I thought, let's go ahead and start at the very bottom of the teardrop area. And so I folded over my wire about that 3 to 4 inch, and then I came back in and I thought, let's connect up to the very top hole then, and just have a series of loops running off the one side of the teardrop. Now, the nice thing in making these loops on this particular teardrop was that the holes were large enough I could easily go, like I did right here, 2 wires through that same hole. And so I really kind of had fun just looping the wire around and just creating a really fun looped design off of this teardrop. So from here, I'm just going to go ahead and let you guys watch my hands talk as I finish up this, and then we're going to discuss a little bit of the paints and how they work on polymer clay. All right, so after the fact, after the fact, I had made up these swatches of the Sharpie Creative Markers, and I really should have done it at the very beginning. I know I probably should have, but I wanted to show you what I had done here. So the swatch done on the top left-hand corner is on unbaked clay, and I can tell you guys, these creative markers, it goes down wonderful on unbaked clay. That being said, if you have a drier marker, it will grab at it if the marker is a little too dry. The bottom left-hand corner has been baked clay. Actually, the piece all together at the bottom, that's baked clay. The first half there on the left side, that one is without varnish. The right-hand side is with varnish. The top right-hand corner is actually done with resin on top of it. And from a top side view, you really can't tell the difference. However, with this being said, if you look at my overall view with everything in it, you could tell in that left-hand corner, that's the resin part. It's really got a lot of flash and stuff. You see more of the intense color, whereas if you've got on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see where I have the varnish over the top of the other colors. I also then wanted to show you guys the overall view of our pendants here. They are really such fun. I really hope you enjoyed this. And overall, if you guys like this video, please like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. I'm always wondering what you're thinking. I also hope you'll use the results that I have here for study and reference. Otherwise, I am sending out my biggest hugs to each of you, and I hope you have a fantastic day.